Open the pages, step inside. Minds in motion, take the ride. Through the highs, the lows, the fight. Build and strengthen every stride. Move the mind, feel it grow. Sport and soul in the flow. Dream it big, let it show. To the peak we're set to go.
All right, everybody, welcome to our latest episode of the Sport and Exercise Psychology Book Club and Podcast. I'm excited to be joined by Danielle Beardsley, who is going to be helping me review and talk about the book Spark by Dr. John Ratey. Danielle Beardsley is the founder of the Therapy and Mental Performance Practice Center for Creative Growth. She is a licensed clinical art therapist and certified addictions counselor in Illinois, as well as a certified mental performance consultant working across all state lines. Danielle has the pleasure of acquiring over 12 years of experience practicing art therapy and mental performance coaching with athletes, coaches, and business owners. Her practice has grown over the last year as it has expanded to welcoming two outstanding mental performance coaches, Carson Fields and Matt Halperin. The Center for Creative Growth offers virtual individual sessions, in-person team sessions, on-site post-performance sessions, as well as offering walk and talk or run and talk sessions. All of the mental performance coaches are not only certified or CMPC applicants through the AASP, they also have the unique experience of competing athletically at the collegiate level. Competing at the collegiate level is certainly not a requirement for CMPCs. However, Danielle's team finds value in the lived experiences as it informs and enhances the work with client athletes. Danielle had the opportunity of running under two female Hall of Fame coaches in high school who led her track team to win the 2007 Illinois State Championships. These wise coaches initially introduced Danielle to the world of mental performance coaching by suggesting Danielle to work with one. Danielle will attest working with a mental performance coach not only changed her athletic ability and athletic trajectory, but it unknowingly changed her life. Danielle saw drastic differences in her running career when working with and without a mental performance coach. Danielle finds the book Spark to be an important book to get under the cranial hood of both competitive athletes and every other person in the world with a brain, mind, and body. And so, like we said, we are going to be discussing the book Spark by Dr. John Ratey, which the summary is the evidence is incontrovertible. And way too early to be, saying out such big words right now. Aerobic exercise physically remodels our brains for peak performance. In Spark, best-selling author and renowned psychiatrist John Ratey presents his pioneering investigation into the transformative effects of exercise on the brain. A fascinating and entertaining journey through the mind-body connection, Spark uncovers startling research to prove that exercise is truly our best defense against everything from mood disorders to Alzheimer's to ADHD to addiction. Filled with amazing case studies such as the revolutionary fitness program in the Naperville, Illinois school district of 19,000 kids, which ranks highest in the world in science test scores, this is the first book to explore comprehensively the link between exercise and the brain. And with a simple targeted regimen to get your body moving and your mind in peak condition, it will forever change the way you think about your morning run, or for that matter, the way you think. Danielle, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Well, thank you for joining me. And what are your thoughts on the book?
Oh my gosh. So I got this book recommended to me from a classmate in a sports psychology class about a year and a half ago. I really valued this classmate's opinion, so I was like, let me check this book out. He was raving about it. I read it in a week. I was over the moon. I was like, this confirms what I kind of just instinctually understood, but also like, again, couldn't put a finger on like what it was really about. An example I'll give for it of where I was like, I knew it. So when I was in college, I had a very intensive painting class, like a painting and drawing class. It was like 3.5 hours long, and it was in pure silence, and it was of live nude models. And you were supposed to crank out numerous pieces, or you were on certain pieces where you were working on that piece for 3.5 hours. I was like, okay, this is going to be really rough in terms of attention and focus. And also I was thinking it was like at 6 p.m. I was like, this is too long of a day. I've already had a whole other lived day of classes as well as practice for, I don't know if it's track or cross country at that time of what, semester I was in. However, the day that this class just naturally fell on was the hardest workouts of my week. Every single week, those were my hard days. And so I'm thinking like, oh my gosh, the last thing I want to do is go sit in a quiet room for 3.5 hours and do this class. Like I just did a hard workout. Like no one else in here can relate. And I was sorely wrong. Within 2 weeks, I like felt like something was magical. Like even though I was rushing to the class because I was barely making it on time with my long workout day and the high intensity of it, I was so laser focused that like the time would go by like this every single time. And the amount that I was cranking out, and honestly, the quality of what I was producing was shocking to me. And I was like, is there something about me doing these really hard workout days and going immediately to this class? I mean, I was drinking like protein smoothies or whatever. Like I didn't even have like a formal like sit down dinner or anything. It like snacks throughout. But when I read Spark, I was like, I think there's something to that correlation. And lo and behold, Spark says, oh, what I was experiencing, which was it was priming my brain to really ready my attention and focus and also open up those learning centers to kind of stretch and grow. And that growth potential pushed me over the edge to also create things that I do believe like wasn't even possibly able to create if I was just coming from 3 other classes back to back. I think my brain wouldn't have been primed to be able to take on that kind of attention and focus. So that's where like I was hooked immediately. And then not to mention how it informed my clinical work with client athletes. And honestly, like my, population of clients that don't identify as being a competitive athlete. Great example of this being with, I mean, we were all there, right? COVID, and everyone's like hunkered down in their own space. I, prior to COVID, was doing a lot of walk and talk. So I would meet my clients at my office, but I'd be like, all right, get up, we're going outside. And we just walk around the neighborhood that my office was located in, actually, which was Naperville. So the study itself, that it was housed in Naperville, I felt an instant connection to that. It was at Naperville Central. But when COVID happened, not only was I hunkered down in my house, everyone else of my clients were. And I was like, no, we're not doing this. Like, I'm still offering walk and talk. So we had like, an honesty agreement of like, you're on a walk, I'm on a walk. We're both walking. We're just on the phone. And I can tell you hand over fist, my clients with the most stubborn depression showed tremendous improvement in their ability to function and their mood regulation, their decrease in irritability, and their like improvement in their familial interpersonal relationships when they were engaging in the walk and talks versus my other set of more stubborn depression clients that they were not into the idea of the walk and talks. And I was like, anecdotally, I feel like there's an obvious difference. But
Right.
then when I remembered, wait, no, Spark says so. And so not only are we walking for 53 minutes, but they're processing what's troublesome and what is, aggravating in their lives. And there's such a tremendous power to that. Again, with also like the eye movement activity that can be similar to EMDR, which is a whole nother topic, but I love Spark and I still love it. I just told you I reviewed it again last night, a couple days, and then this morning. So I cannot speak.
And what's fascinating too is that you have a lot of that like direct experience that he talks about in the book. And it's even crazier that you are in the Naperville community.
Yeah.
So I imagine you probably like possibly worked with a lot of like the students or people that have been through that kind of system as well. So have also that direct experience. But before you even read the book, of being able to notice, oh, like when you took that art class, being able to notice, oh, there's a clear difference here between my mental focus and my creative output and just my general
Yeah.
perception of what this class thinking, oh, this is going to be a pain in the ass class. It's like, in the
Yeah.
evening on Monday after I've gone through this whole day of
Tired.
stuff to
Yeah.
do and stuff, but then all of a sudden you're like looking at the work of your art and other things, and all of a sudden like, was that me? Was that me? And stuff.
It
But then
really was. I was like, how did I focus this long?
exactly, and being able to notice that within your clients as well. I mean, for me, I always love that as well. It's just like if we need something to discuss,
Yeah.
let's go for a walk or just something just to kind of get some physical activity in. And
Yes.
there's a lot of that research out there that shows the effects of exercise and physical activity on mental health and mental wellness, which is really well established, especially in Spark, where he really lays that down as key
Yes.
thing. And so it's one of those
I
things, like you said, I think is a really fascinating insight in the book that he really lays out really well.
Yeah, I think I most appreciated the fact that it wasn't just focused on the teens in this experiment and how we can just gush over those results, but you know, John Ratey took it so much deeper and applied it to, again, more of that stubborn depression, anxiety, working at, the brains of addictions, looking at postpartum mothers, looking at aging individuals and dementia and Alzheimer's. Like when he brings in all of that data, you cannot dispute this book. You can try, you cannot. And
Yeah.
so I really appreciated the depth at which this book went, that it started with this beautiful research, but it applies to everyone. You don't have to be in high school or be in college or trying to like pursue your PhD to take away the tremendous value of how us engaging in exercise as a lifestyle truly like encourages our growth potential of our brain. And at the molecular level, as he says, like this is the most impactful form of medicine that we have. But why is this not more out there? And before this podcast started, you and I both commiserated, like, gosh, if this could just be almost required by every human to read, just like, you should know this about your brain and body, because why would we keep this info from you?
Well, and what I really like too is that because he does dive deep into some like really nerdy scientific explanations of things, but he does a really good job of being able to translate that into something that the average reader could understand.
Agreed.
So he talks about brain-derived neurotropic factor, which for me, when I was reading that, I was like, oh my gosh, that's like so cool how it enhances neuroplasticity and how it just is a flood of cascade of not just BDNF, but also all the endorphins, all the other delicious chemicals that your
Yep.
brain, flushes into your brain during exercise. But then the way that he breaks it down of like, what is brain-derived neurotrophic factor? And of course, I'm a Star Trek nerd, so in Star
Yeah.
Trek it explains technobabble using metaphors, right? So they'll be
Yeah.
like, we use a bunch of like technobabble type stuff, and then be like, oh, it's just like trying to jump off a bridge into a shot glass or something like that. And so he does a metaphor really well here when he calls it like a miracle grow for the brain, right? When it's like, okay, this is the chemical that enhances neuroplasticity and encourages neurogenesis and all these other things that your brain will use to prime itself for. Now you can learn, you can absorb new information, you could process emotions a lot more healthy in a lot of different ways too, which is like
100%.
when he was going all into these details, I was just like the nerd in me was just like drooling like, oh my God,
Yes.
I want to learn more now, be able to expand upon that.
Yes. I can personally relate to the BDNF. With in the last year and a half, I had a pretty extensive concussion, and my recovery time was long. It was much longer than I expected, and I attribute part of that extended length to some pretty poor medical advice I was getting about staying sedentary, avoiding extra stimuli, like not engaging in physical activity. And it wasn't until I read the book I think it was called Concussion Rescue, and they talked a great deal about BDNF and how, like, again, like priming that brain neuroplasticity and that miracle grow to take off and heal the brain from a concussion. So when we think about our client athletes and them coming back from concussion recovery, return back to sport, is like we also need to be, informed that, you know, checking in with them, what kind of responses are they getting from their medical team if they're up to date? Because I can assure you the ones I was getting, like the referral, not referral, what's the word?
Um,
Recommendation, the treatment planning, I should say, it didn't seem to be up to snuff with like what the current research says. And so again, like this book, Spark, continues to exemplify why exercise is so important for the miracle grow of the brain to heal the body, and then the body to, reconnect to the brain. And they're constantly, communication. So I love this for informing the work with our client athletes for concussion recovery and even the injury recovery, right? Like if you are a soccer player, you're a football player, or if you're a lacrosse player and you have, really injured your wrist and you can't do the typical, fine motor skills, but like, why aren't you walking? And like, what can we jog? So allowing us to remind our clients, yeah, you're not doing your exact sport, but like, are we not working on our brain in the off season or in the off time until you can return back? And that votal or the what is it called? The visual I can't think of the phrase right now. Visual motorization. It'll come back to me, but like not just are we visually motor visualization, are we not just visualizing the motor, tactical interplay of like maybe the skill set you lost because you're injured, but how the exercise can actually solidify that motor visualization to be more salient. Like that's insane to me.
right.
That is wild. Again, because of those learning centers are
Yeah.
more common.
One of the things I really enjoyed is when I was teaching my exercise psychology classes, I actually used this book as a major foundation of that to be able to say, okay, y'all, like let's talk about exercise psychology as a whole. Obviously, what's different between that and sports psychology, and talking a lot about okay, we talk the use of physical activity and exercise as an intervention, but
Yes.
also just in general as a way to enhance people's quality of life, in terms of this, and always reminding like, hey, you don't have to do intense workouts. You don't have to do crazy exercises or things like that. I always tell them, I was like, we talk about the benefits on mental health, especially, right? So how does
Yeah.
exercise influence depression and anxiety and all these other things? Is like, you don't need to do a maximum effort to see an effect. It's like any
Yeah.
physical activity at
Anything.
level is good on
Yeah.
that front. And that's where we kind of I think a lot of people get lost in the translation a little bit. It's like, oh, they think, oh, we need to go for a workout at the gym. Like if we're doing
Yeah.
a concussion protocol rehab, well, of course you're not going to do crazy training or you're not going to necessarily return to sport, but go for a freaking walk. Like go
When
find
I,
a park and
yeah.
walk around and look at the trees and listen to the
Yeah.
birds and like that itself can do so much for you. And I was
Yes.
with my exercise psychology students a campaign with them as part of their classwork of let's actually how do we promote exercise and physical activity as a way to help the campus community like prepare for finals to prepare for all these other things. And
Yes.
the place that I'm at right now is full of forests and trees and things like that, and it's like a lot of them were just realizing, oh, something as simple as going for a walk, or let's
Yeah.
just, let's instead of driving to the closest parking spot to the classroom, let's park in the other lot over across the
Yes.
street where we have to take an extra 5 minutes to walk or do anything.
Yes.
And
Well,
so it was a
yeah.
lot of that was like also introducing here's ways you can exercise without it actually being exercise or feeling like exercise, right? So I pulled in my Dance Revolution setup one day and I was like, we're just gonna play our class today is gonna play Dance Revolution because
100%.
you learn it is exercise, but you don't feel like it's exercise because
Right.
it's a game and you're just getting
Yeah.
into all these things. And it's like, look at
Yeah.
something as simple as this has that huge benefit to you
Yes.
physically and mentally on that front.
Yes. And that mental strain of, the tactical approach of the Dance Revolution, as they talk about in Spark, really does both, right? It's the physical, but it's that mind attention to shut off that hippocampal overthinking and allow the amygdala to kind of just take over and prime its, self to like a sense of mastery. And I love that you do that with your class. I was recently sitting for the CMPC's Certified Mental Performance Consultant test through Association of Applied Sports Psychology. Again, attentional focus for me has always been an issue, especially long durations of study. This just happened like over the last 2-3 months. But what I decided to play with, and I was like, okay, I don't like studying, and I definitely don't want to do it at this point in my life. Like right now, this is not intriguing to me. So I was like, I'm just gonna again think about Spark. I'm gonna take what I know and I'm gonna marry it with something that increases my dopamine, but also increases the sense of my, or the, I guess, activation of my five senses. So I would go on a kayak 4 hours, sit in the kayak. I wouldn't even like be rowing, but just being out there while I would do these practice tests over and over and over. I was, well, contained. I wasn't like just going to get up and just walk around and procrastinate, but I was in a space where I was allowed to have my dopamine, serotonin, all that be like the neurochemical soup be stirred up
Yeah.
while doing something that was hard and was difficult. And then, switching to what you said with your students, it's like, how can we make education also, because it is hard, it can be taxing and difficult. You have to plan. How can you marry it with something that is, again, really beneficial for the brain? I started taking those practice tests and going on, again, if you have the time or don't, like 3-hour walks. I was going in the woods in a forest path for 3 hours. Again, I was staring at my phone because it was practice test, but I
Yeah.
was doing something that was taxing my body for 3 hours. I was in nature. I heard different sounds, but I was marrying, in my opinion, the association of something pleasurable with something non-pleasurable for me, which was studying. And when I took the test, I genuinely felt so confident and prepared because of the way I practice for it. And I think again, Spark has a great deal of marriage to like why it worked, as well as like that morning I made sure to go on a burst of a run 20 minutes with like short intervals so I can get that, BDNF or that growth HGH a little bit popping, so I could feel primed and ready with my focus. As well as before this, I made sure I went on a 30-minute run with some bursts of intervals so that I can feel sharp for you and the podcast.
Yeah, it's funny you say that because I also did the same thing. Like whenever I'm like for testing or like when I was doing my master's degree, especially, or
Yeah.
preparing for some of these certification tests, it's like I'm gonna go for a swim, right beforehand. And sometimes I get a little worried because then I end up like swimming so late that I'm like, oh shit, I gotta go get the test, and
I
stuff.
will
But
do.
it was funny because you talk about testing for the CMPC. So when I was preparing to study for my CSCS, which is the Certified Strength and Conditioning
Yeah,
specialist, and it's also a very high level certification like the CMPC is.
yeah,
Okay, so interestingly enough, I was living in Denver at the time.
yeah.
You got this big thick ass textbook you got to read, and they can test you on everything in the textbook, and so it's a lot of information, um, and so one of the things I would do is I would go hiking with my friends. And in Colorado, we have these mountains, 14ers, which are peaks above 14,000 feet. And, there's varying levels of them. Like some of them are really technical, require lots
Yeah,
of hours. Some of the ones you can hike up with like friends in a day.
yeah.
I would go hike up these 14ers with like a group of friends. And as we're climbing, I would just be like explaining to them what's going on in their body right now based on the physical activity, the exercise intensity.
Yes,
And I'm like, basically just reiterate.
locking it in. Yes.
And I'm like, here's why your muscles are burning because of the lack of oxygen means that we're in an anaerobic state of blah, 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 blah. And my friends are just like, oh my God, shut up. But I'm over here just like processing
Yes.
information, and then I come
Yes,
back and I'm like, oh, I'm like, review that chapter. Okay, I got that, and so then by the time I did the test itself, I was like, okay, I'm, oh yeah, I
yeah,
remember talking about that when we were on the peak of this mountain.
exactly. You cemented it into the memory. You could probably recall like where you were at what tree when you recalled that. That's the beauty of
Exactly. Exactly, so it was quite fun, because you realize, oh yeah, this really
it.
does.
Yes,
And I really like that he talked about Dance Dance Revolution because I mean, as a millennial, I grew up on Dance Dance Revolution, right? All the
yes,
arcades and
yes.
stuff like that. And
The
I loved
movie.
introducing it to my classes as well because they're all Gen Z students, of course, and they all have like Just Dance and kind of the next
Yeah,
evolution of DDR, So I'm like, yeah, Just Dance is perfect for this and stuff. But I also reflected with them because I said, hey, you think about exercise, right? You think about, oh, going to the gym, it's a workout. Okay, I have to kind of like mentally prepare
yeah,
myself, and you think, oh, it's I'm doing this for exercise, right? I was like, what are your perceptions of playing Dance Dance Revolution? Because they would come up and play, and like they finish, and we would like kind of mess with the difficulty level.
right.
So like, okay, here's like the beginner level, and they're like, okay, let's try it easy, let's try it intermediate, and they're like trying to do it, and then afterwards they're like, okay, oh gosh, I need to sit down. Oh my God, oh my God. I was like, when you were playing that, did it feel like you were exercising? They're like, oh yeah, I could tell I was exercising, but I was like, well, what was your perception though? Did you feel like you were getting a workout? They're like, no, I was just trying to play the game, and I was just trying to keep up with the step
Yeah,
and do all.
yeah,
It was interesting to see like their perception of the activity itself of thinking, oh, I'm not exercising, I'm just playing a game. It just
yeah,
happens to be to play the game, you have to be physically active. So it's interesting on
yeah,
that front to kind of see how they perceived
yeah.
the activity versus if they were to say, oh, let's go
100%.
or go hit the gym or something like that.
Yeah. I almost wish the word exercise would be like illegal because I think it activates such a stress response for people that are not just typically in their upbringing like into a bunch of athletics. With my clients that I work with that are not, high performing athletes, if I bring that word up, it's like it's a visceral response. It's such a loaded narrative around one word. And so I'm with you on this, where, if we can really make anything more game like, whether, challenge like, rather than this endeavor that has this narrative around body image and, like a certain standard of like, I have to be fit enough to go to the gym and I have to wear a certain amount of clothes or these kinds of like, it becomes this challenge point for people, I think, that they get paralyzed by the decision making. And as the book talks about, it is difficult to stick with a movement regimen. I'll say movement because there is planning that goes into it. Like you do have to install it into your day. It has to be an intention there. But, I do fun things too, where it's like, okay, you hate doing, the typical kind of exercise of like going to the gym or like getting on your bike and like getting all strapped together with all the clothes you need. What if your mom just dropped you out of the car when you're a mile away
Yeah,
from your house? And you
right.
have to walk home, or you have to run home, or you have to walk, run home. They're like, what? And I'm like, what if you did that? So it's this idea of like, you have to go home. You will go home, but
Mhm.
you were gonna go home anyways. You just get home maybe 15 minutes longer, but
Yeah,
you're done, and things like what's the other thing? Same thing like what you talked about, like parking really far away, but like what if you didn't even park in the area at all and you
yeah.
had to walk to the store? Like as
Mhm.
if you, again, going back to what Spark talks about with um what is it, chasing after antelope or killing antelope. Like we are designed to go very long with bursts of speed, but then also some recovery. Like,
Right.
are you doing that enough in your life? Probably not, right? A lot of us aren't. So if you're going to go fend for your food at Costco, could you do it in a different way where, you don't carry a cart and you have to carry it all? Like you have to carry what you buy.
Exactly. And it's like that's where we can like talk about like the motivation, right? Because it's like, well, what is the intention of this activity, right? What is the intention of us doing this? And so you say, okay, yeah, we're going to go to the gym, we're going to exercise, and you think, okay, like you said, it conjures up this perception or the stereotype or this trope of what this is versus, oh, I need to go to the store or I need to,
Right.
do
Right.
something like this. When I was living in Denver, I was living in downtown Denver and I could walk everywhere. And that was the reason why I wanted to live down there. I was like, I want to
Yeah.
park my car and just walk
Yeah.
everywhere. And I always like, it was interesting because when I would go to the grocery store, I had two basic reusable bags that I would take with me, and only one I could carry in each hand. And so I said, okay, it was actually helpful for me on budgeting my groceries because I said I can only budget based on what I can carry in these two hands for this, half a mile walk or whatever that.
Yep.
And so, but it was like, it was all exercise, just carrying two heavy bags of stuff,
Yeah.
over that course. So you're kind of creating constraints within your environment to
Yes.
change the intention and the outcome of what you're trying to do. Is like, okay, I know I'm doing this. I'd rather
Yeah.
walk instead of drive, but
Yeah.
I'm doing this because I want to go to the store rather than just do it for random exercise
Yeah.
or things like that, which has been quite interesting. Because even here now, it's like sometimes you live in places where maybe obviously maybe walking isn't the safest or it's
Right.
most
Right. Right.
accessible to go to the grocery store, right? But you create the kind of conditions that you want to change your intention for doing
Yes.
exercise or physical activity, and that's kind
Yeah.
of there.
They talk a lot in the book, more in the later part of the book about postpartum mothers, and that's a really big issue. I mean, I'm a recently postpartum mother. My kids are 6 and 5 now, and I think one of the biggest thing that happens to any parent is like you feel like your sense of control in your life is completely gone, and things that you felt masterful about just are not the same. And so similarly, like you, it's like, well, I got to go to Aldi anyway. So like I could just easily get in the car, schlep my kids there, do the shopping, go back. Or I could like put them in a running Bob stroller, get my like you reusable bags. I can only carry so much back. And so I started like running to Aldi. It was like a mile-ish, a little over. Um, get a run in there. The kids loved it. I blast music. We're out in nature. They get tired, do the thing, check out. Now it's really heavy on the way back. But again, I'm budgeting.
That's
And
all you
so,
got. You gotta get back somehow.
yeah, I had to do the thing. Yeah, I have to go back. But it like just provided me like a sense of control. Like I am I am masterful of something, even though it's this mundane thing of grocery shopping I have to do. But I think for a lot of postpartum parents, it's like allowing you to be really creative with like how can I flex and like mind hack my sense of like control of my life again. And exercise is that key of stressing the body to prove like I am powerful. I can do really hard things.
Right.
And it doesn't have to be wild. I don't have to go, sign up at Lifetime and have a mortgage of a, payment to Lifetime, which Lifetime is incredible, but it's not affordable for, a lot of us. And I think it can be simple things like, almost gamifying what you have to do anyways.
Exactly. And that's actually something I've employed with my own athletes as well, not only from a mental performance side, but also a strength and conditioning side as well. Be able to say, okay, if we're doing a workout, it's this workout's gonna suck. It's based on like aerobic
Yeah.
endurance or whatever like that. It's a grind. But then you also sometimes, especially when I'm working with younger athletes, that are more youth and kids and stuff like that,
Yeah.
is be able to say, we're going to play a game of tic-tac-toe. But here's
Yeah.
how we're going to set this up. You're going to start 10 meters back and you have to run. And it's like, oh, we're doing the outcomes of the exercises that I want, but it's making a game more so that they don't realize, oh, if I were to say, here, we're going to run these sprints. Okay, what's your perceived effort? They would say, oh,
Yeah.
it's like a 9 or a 10, but it's like, but then we
Yes.
play a game of tic-tac-toe, and all of a sudden their effort level is way higher, but their perceived effort is still the same, even though it's like, wow, you're running
Yes.
faster, you're breathing heavier, you're going a
Yes.
lot further, you're doing a lot more on this
Right.
game versus this exercise, which
Yeah,
means,
absolutely.
you know,
Well, you actually are marrying a lot of what they talk about, which is the rat study of, well, was it the rat study? Well, no, no. reversed because rats like will jump on any wheel versus us humans are not going to just jump on a wheel if it's there.
Right.
They talked about what they found with the participants that I think these were more older, like adult participants. If the perceived idea was that they were forced to do it versus if they were finding some intrinsic or extrinsic like motivation, like fine, I'll do it, like I actually want to do it, that it actually, the benefits were much higher because for some that were feeling forced to do it, they ended up experiencing more cortisol spike because they didn't enjoy it, they didn't like it.
Right.
And so what trumps that is constantly marrying it with the social piece. And so your kids in the class, when you're doing that tic-tac-toe like racing game, they are together. So it's competition or it's collaboration or cooperation. But they talk about in the book that everything is amplified, everything on all accounts for your brain when you marry it with the social interaction. And I wonder if that, they didn't really talk about this specifically, but I actually wonder if that is an obvious piece of the research in the class environment is like all the kids were together versus like you bring this research to you or I living in our house, maybe alone. Are we going to have like the same outcome as if you and I did this challenge with a community that we set up in our area?
Yeah. So what are your final takeaways from the book?
No, I mean, that's a hard, loaded question. I think the final takeaway is when in doubt, move. You know, I think with, they also describe depression as energy without direction. And, you know, the irony that when we don't feel motivated or we don't feel energized, the last thing we want to do is exercise. The last thing we want to do is move because we don't feel like we have the reason to. But when in doubt, still go. Take the body, leave the mind. A lot of what I talk about in my practice is behavioral activation. You don't need to wait for your brain to be ready or feel ready, emotionally even, to go take the body. Take the body, the mind will catch on. That's that closing of the gap our brains naturally want to do. So if I can like just shout from the rooftop to anyone is do it anyways and see what happens.
Right. I really like that, you know, and it's very important. For me, I think a big takeaway on that front is I really liked at one point he was talking about the Naperville district example and how they would assess the PE performance and grade the students.
Oh my gosh. Yes.
It went from completing the mile run with an objective performance to completing it more based on a subjective performance, which in this case was heart rate rather than time, and figuring out that all the students were putting in the same amount of effort based on heart rate, even though their objective performance, the time of their run was a lot different. So I think that was really key for me because the takeaway from that was being, never make assumptions about a person's capabilities, performance based solely on an objective measure, especially if they're still putting in the work. And for us, especially in, like you said, the stereotype of exercise is, we kind of have this stereotype of here's what exercise is. And so people have that expectation going into it. And so they're saying, well, just because we see somebody that's not going as fast or as strong as somebody else doesn't necessarily mean they're not putting in the same amount of work.
Or more. Their target heart rate that they're getting at, I mean, that example they gave in the book was he apologized that he was judging one of the female students that he was like, I thought she was like slacking, like she was barely looked like she was trying. And then when he clocked her target heart rate she was at, it was a 209. She said that he couldn't even imagine that his highest performing athletes could hang out in that target heart rate that long. And like that blew my mind. Like there's so much that I think we are correcting with understanding the relationship with our mind body connection and instilling in young youth how to continue in their life beyond just like a gym class, that this is a lifestyle. I think we're getting so good at this, but unfortunately I do feel a sense of sadness that some, gym educators or, physical educators in the past probably did a disservice without knowing it because that was the knowledge we had of judging an experience of someone trying in gym class, like in PE, based on the outcome versus like understanding what was happening physiologically to them. And so I
Right.
know that we're correcting that, and I'm glad.
Right. It's about building a positive relationship between exercise and
Yeah.
and physical activity, right? And I mean, I was one of those kids that my gym class experiences were awful and
Yeah.
hated it. And it was because of that kind of stuff. And nowadays it's getting better, but I mean, it still takes time and education because a lot of this is still rooted in, oh, this is how we used to always do it. And
Yeah.
like that. But now it's like, things like this are creating the change. And I tell my students, okay, it's all about the relationship
Yeah.
between your client and physical activity. That's what's creating more, because if you can develop that positive relationship, then they're going to be more intrinsically motivated to do it on one way or another. It's, thinking instinctually, oh, I'm feeling kind of down today. I'm going to go for a walk. Or, oh, I'm getting nervous about, up and coming test or whatever. Okay, I'm going to go and whatever, right? So it's you want to make it so that they're automatically motivated to do that
Yeah.
as part of their lifestyle, part of their process, rather than make it becoming a chore type thing like that as well. So
A
it's
remedy is really changing that relationship with their mind body connection. To use exercise as a remedy is, I think, one of the most magical tools we could instill in anyone. And I am optimistic that this will continue to take off, and we will, definitely make right what has been a little wronged, because we just didn't have the information, and we had some old biases that had stuck for so long. But they are being challenged, and I'm glad that you're doing a podcast like this to like reemphasize like what is so powerful in this book. And so yeah.
I think that's a good spot to leave it on. So
Yeah.
I appreciate you coming on to the podcast and having this discussion with me, because it's one of my favorite books as well. So I'm very happy we finally got to be able to chat about it.
Yeah, whoever's listening to this, like, I double dare you to read it. You will not be sorry.
And so, Danielle, where can people find you online and on social media?
So Instagram at Center for Creative Growth. And then I'm on LinkedIn. It's just Danielle Beardsley. And then what's the other? The website, creativegrowthcenter.com. So if you're interested in learning more about run-in talks or walk-in talks, we can provide that service, whether it be for therapeutic reason, like for actual therapy. I do art therapy as well, or mental performance coaching, for whatever it is that you might be wanting to work through or advance and excel in your life. We got you covered from academics to athletics to business performance or stage performance and all that. So just honestly text us, call us. Our numbers are all over. We're open for you.
All that information will be available in the show notes, so people can find you quite easily on that front. And for all my listeners out there, if you liked our episode, make sure you leave us a review and a nice rating to help us grow our audience. And feel free to share the episode as well across your networks as well. So again, Danielle, thank you for coming on to the show. Appreciate it. And we'll look forward to seeing you next time.
Appreciate you. Thank you for doing this. Thanks for having me.
Open the pages, step inside. Minds in motion, take the ride. Through the highs, the lows, the fight. Building strength in every stride. Move the mind, feel it grow. Sport and soul in the flow. Dream it big, let it show. To the peak we're set to go. We talk, we share, we find the way. Fuel the fire every day. Books and voices light the spark. Chasing goals and leaving marks. Move the mind, feel it grow. Sport and soul in the flow. Dream mind, feel it grow. Sport and soul in the flow. Dream it big, let it show. To the peak we're set to go. To the peak we're set to go.